I support what my people are doing for 100 years. Hamas is a new phenomenon. I support my people's readiness to put up the fight against the injustice. I support this heroic scenes of our youth everywhere, in Jerusalem, in Ramallah, in Nablus, in Gaza.
Aren't they replacing the authority that you actually are appointed by?
Krishna, this isn't a Palestinian fight. Don't frame it this way. This is a struggle between the Palestinian people and a state that is harboring terrorism, that is Israel, a state that has occupied our land for all these years. Palestine has one government, that is the Palestine Liberation Organization, and Palestine has one flag, and Palestine has one united people.
And you support, by your own, declaration now, the firing of rockets by Hamas?
I did not say I support the rockets.
Well, you said you support what the Palestinian people are doing.
I said...
So are you saying you don't support
I know,
rockets?
I am saying that you are looking at one arena. This whole thing started only a few weeks ago by the heroism of our people in Jerusalem who stood firm against the plans to ethnically cleansing them from their own homes that they have lived in for generations. That's what I said. All what I'm saying is that Israel besieges people in Gaza, Krishnan. For the last 15 years, I was born in Gaza. I know these families, these faces. I know who was killed. I called my sister only 2 nights ago, and she, there were sounds around her. I said, what are you doing? She said, my 6 children are with me in the same bed. They're sleeping here. I said, why?
But you have to address
she said, if
the
we're
rocket
killed,
attacks
we want
as well.
to die all together.
I know you condemn Israel.
What do you expect from a people who are bombarded continuously, besieged for the last 15 years?
What do you think is the effect on the likelihood of peaceful negotiation of sending thousands of rockets into Israel? What do you think is the political effect of that?
The effect of the provocation that has led to the situation is the question to be asked. Who provoked all this? It's the Israeli constant Netanyahu, deliberate provocation in Al-Aqsa Mosque right at the height of Ramadan.
I know that's what you think.
Right at the height of Ramadan.
But I'm not asking you about Israel.
You know the sensitivity of millions, hundreds, 2 billion Muslims in that region. You invade Al-Aqsa Mosque, you storm it with your soldiers, you brutalize hundreds of
But I have to ask you about the behavior of Palestinians. I know this is what you think about Israel.
No.
It's been repeated many times. Okay?
Then you don't want me to talk about the act. You only want me to talk about the react.
I want to talk about your actions, the Palestinian people's actions.
Okay,
not Israel.
This is the coffee.
Because I know what you think.
Okay, let me say this.
About Israel.
You want me to talk about
question.
rockets, okay?
Yeah.
You want me to talk about rockets. We accept international law in full, Krishna, in full. We have referred our occupied territories to the International Criminal Court. In our referral as a state, we said, come and investigate all war crimes and crimes against humanity in our territory, committed by anybody, but primarily by the occupying force, Israel. So let the international law decide. Let the ICC come and decide who commits war crimes, including the issue of rockets. But primarily, the main instigator is the occupier. But guess who blocks our attempts at the ICC? Number one, Israel. Number two, some world powers, including the US and the UK, who keep saying that Israel is above the law. That because Israel is our friend, that's the Prime Minister, Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, in a letter to the Israel lobby only recently, that he does not support Palestinian efforts at the ICC to bring an end to this injustice, bring about accountability.
So you would support prosecutions?
Because Israel, the Prime Minister said, because Israel is a friend and an ally. You know what that means? That means international law does not apply on friends and allies. This is the problem.
Then let's talk about...
The problem is international complacency. And in some regards, like the US approving $750 million worth of military equipments to Israel right at the height of the aggression, this is the real issue we have.
Then let's talk about the way forward. Do you accept, as the Israelis seem to say now, that a two-state solution is not happening? It's not the future.
We accepted the two-state solution.
I know, but do you now think...
And we now still accept the two-state solution. We officially recognize the state of Israel on the 1967 borders. We abide by the international resolutions to the dot.
If the two-state solution is effectively dead because Israel won't pursue it, doesn't really believe in it anymore, what is the way forward?
I'll tell you what is the way forward. The way forward is this conflict was started by international forces, Britain, the US after it. This conflict will only end by an international will and decision. This conflict will end when the international community enforces its own laws. This conflict will end once Israel's culture of impunity ends.
It's all very well you saying you want a Palestinian state and you want a two-state solution. Hamas doesn't want Israel to exist. It doesn't recognize the right of Israel to exist. Are all those people suddenly going to change their minds?
Look at Israel's problem now. They talk about Hamas and President Abbas. These are the problems for them. They don't talk about what they have done by deeds on the ground for years to make the two-state solution irreversibly impossible. And this is the key. How do we stop this? I tell you, if there is international sufficient will, Israel will reverse all this. This is a cost-benefit analysis. This is a cost-benefit equation. Israel so far believes that the benefit of continuing, keeping the occupation, the colonization, the ethnic cleansing, the besiegement of the Gaza people, the draconian apartheid system that was described by the human rights organizations, keeping it has no cost. And guess what? It has so much profit because they are using the majority of our land, my land, our water, our resources. They are using even our cheap labor.
But
so there is no incentive to change the status quo.
Do you think you can ever get to anything as close as the deal Arafat walked away from?
The deal Arafat would never walk away from a deal that would have given us our national rights and our individual rights. And these rights are very clear, Krishnan. It's the right to end the occupation that began in 1967, the right to establish our own state in these territories with East Jerusalem its capital, and resolving the issue of refugees that started by own parents 73 years ago.
But you were very close to that.
No.
In 2000,
This is the,
and Arafat walked away.
You know what? This is the Israeli spin. I know because I was the ambassador, the Palestinian ambassador in Washington. I asked all the Clinton advisors. I was told that you were given a big proportion, but in reality, you were not given sovereignty in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is the mother of all issues for us. This is our capital. This is the Palestinian DNA, Jerusalem. And of course, we rejected it, and we will reject it again. And this is what the world needs to understand. Our offer for a two-state solution was never a Palestinian demand. Our offer was a Palestinian concession. We accepted the international requirement upon us, and that was the maximum we could have offered Israel, and the minimum we could have accepted. We will not accept less than this. We want, even 100 years from now, the Palestinians realize that this two-state solution, unfair it was, compromising on us it was, is the absolute minimum we could accept.
I put last night to the Israeli ambassador that it was also Israel's responsibility that Israelis are dead in the last 10 days. Doesn't the same thing apply to the Palestinians?
How come?
That you also have to say it is partly your actions that have led to 64 children being killed and over 200 people in
How on earth can you equate between the occupier and the occupied, between the besieger and the besieged, between the colonizer and the colonized?
Because your behavior is very similar.
How can, no, in no way you can draw any sort of symmetry between a military occupation, a state that is harboring all this control system. It's the fourth strongest army on earth. It has nuclear capability like no one else. It has the full support of the US in any case, unconditionally, and between a besieged, occupied people who are trying just to have their voices heard. There is no comparison.
Clearly, you believe Britain has responsibility,
of course,
historically, for the Balfour Declaration
and the US
and everything that happened as a result of that.
Yes.
So what is Britain's responsibility now? What could Britain do that it isn't doing?
I want a clear commitment by the UK government, not by words, but by deeds, to fix this, to fix the mess that was created here. Number one, the recognition of the state of Palestine. What are they waiting for? This is long overdue. This is our right and their obligation. Number two, enforce your law. The UK law, which clearly stipulates that exporting guns and weapons, arms to a country that violates human rights is illegal under your law, let alone international law. Arms embargo immediately. Number three, do not import settlement products. Illegal. You, as a UK, describe it as illegal. Number four, in the meantime, allow us to use international mechanisms like the ICC to bring accountability, to stop Israel from war crimes, to have a deterrence. Don't block us. Number five, and finally, push with us for an international momentum to implement international resolutions, not negotiate them. Bring the world together to bring the Israelis and the Palestinians to implement your own resolutions. But this lip service that we believe in the two-state solution, these statements that we are so sad about the death toll, we no longer believe in.
And are you prepared to hand over the terrorists who have planned suicide bombings and the war criminals who have fired indiscriminately at civilians in Israel?
We have accepted the ICC, whatever the...
Is that a yes? You're prepared to hand them over?
Whatever the ICC decides, we will accept it. And for your knowledge, Hamas is part of our national committee that has referred our territory to the ICC. So even Hamas accepts
so
the ICC.
Palestinian terrorists and war criminals will be held to account.
The spokesman for the national committee to refer Israel to the ICC was a Hamas leader. The entire Palestinian people want to bring an end to the culture of impunity, to Israel being above the law, to getting away with murder in a daily basis, not only these days, by the way. So we want the full enforcement of international law, and we will accept it upon ourselves before we accept it on others.
Ambassador, thank you very much.